All right, so welcome to the fifth installment of the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. My name is Kharmah, and I am from Simon Says Booking and EngageYourFanbase.com and Live Music News and Review. And today we have Abby Sapochetti, newly Sapochetti, used to be, was it Winsler?
It was Winsler, yep.
Winsler, but newly Sapochetti. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And she is from the Stone Church in Newmarket, New Hampshire, which is an awesome venue that I have the pleasure of working with. And we today are going to talk about music marketing from the venue's perspective, which should be pretty cool because it's certainly a different perspective than the artist's perspective, I think, and an important perspective. But I'm going to go ahead and tell all of my 23 followers that we are live. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about the Stone Church first?
Well, the Stone Church.
Yep, go ahead.
The Stone Church has been a historic building since 1832, and it's worn lots of hats. It's been a textile factory, churches, schools, this and that. But in 1969, a few UNH alumni bought the building and turned it into a music club as part of kind of like a Save Rock and Roll, piggybacking off the Woodstock thing. And so that it's been 46 years now that it's been a rock and roll club. And it's obviously seen a lot of changes in the music industry, in the demographic in Newmarket and such. And, it's artists that have played at the Stone Church before include Bonnie Raitt, Aerosmith, Fish, the Wood Brothers. I could go on, but it has a really rich history, and which is great because Newmarket, for those people who don't know, is a very small town. It's near UNH, so it is near a university town, but it's still not necessarily a well-traveled area. So, and in Newmarket, it's the highest point in town. It's up on a hill, so it's kind of like this central location and the
central, but kind of hard to find.
Yes,
kind of squirrely.
Yep.
It's certainly, it's not your typical like walk up crowd too. It's a harder to, it's a destination.
It definitely is, and that provides benefits and challenges. The other thing is it's not. Our community is so diverse. We have people who were going to the Stone Church in 1969, as well as new college students who are just turning 21 and discovering the club scene. So you have a lot of people that have this sense of loyalty to the good old days of rock and roll, and then this new fresh blood that sees it as something else. So it's I mean, with every venue you have, your own unique clientele and issues, and so that's kind of a snapshot of what the Stone Church is like.
It's a really cool venue. I love going there. I don't live near it, as you know, and I don't get to go out very often, although I get to go out this December, but I love the place. So what's I guess I'll start with, what do you think makes, marketing wise, what do you think, just get into the meat of the conversation, what do you think makes the Stone Church successful marketing wise? What do you think is the secret sauce that sets it apart from other venues that aren't making it successfully in with their marketing?
I do think that, probably the central theme of this conversation is the whole concept of social media and digital marketing, because that's become the crux of marketing for musicians. And I think that one of the things about Newmarket is, like I said, it's huge demographics. So we can target these different demographics and use a lot of different strategies to pull in a lot of different people. So I think because we have these diehards from 1969 and beyond, we can still use old school marketing techniques like flyers and word of mouth and that kind of stuff. But then on the other end of it, and that's what we do kind of on the ground based at the Stone Church, but because we have Simon Says Booking working for us, and you guys have such knowledge and experience around the social media, I think that aspect of it, and which is what you guys mainly do, because I feel like our hands aren't really in the social media that much. I just feel like those two worlds converge and kind of get at all of our fan base.
So it's kind of, do you feel like, so we don't really see that boots on the ground, the 1969 diehards. I don't reach them. I don't know if I reach them. I mean, there's certainly plenty of that demographic on Facebook,
Definitely.
but I don't see the flyers.
Yeah.
You know, what does that look like on the ground?
I still think that there's those people who will see a flyer hanging up in Portsmouth or Exeter or some other neighboring town, and they still get that magical feeling that we used to get in the past when you didn't have the internet and you just saw a flyer hanging up for particular music. I think it works well for roots music and more traditional music, and like I said, not so youth oriented, but there is a sense of community in Newmarket. It's not, like I said, we're not in the city. We're not on a busy street with multiple clubs and other places that are proclaiming what we have going on. So a lot of it is word of mouth too, which is even more old school than paper flyers. So it's at the Big Bean, which is a restaurant in town where everyone goes and has breakfast. If we're there, it's shouting across the room and telling them what's going on that night. So that is one aspect of the small town part of Newmarket that is really, really nice.
The street team, we talked recently about street teaming, and you know, that's a big part of getting the flyers out there. But how has that evolved? I mean, we've had some issues with the street teaming recently, and why don't you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually evolved backwards to the point where I'm cutting back on my on foot street team and flyers, only because I feel like I'm not entirely sure how many people it reaches. And I think for the individual who views the flyers and gets excited for the show, like, we can't discount that one or two people that see it and get excited and tell their friends and bring them in. But in terms of hitting a bigger audience and a new clientele and people who don't know about the Stone Church yet and haven't been on our website, I really do think it's, unfortunately or fortunately, the digital marketing and the online social media kind of advertising that reaches the most people.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of going from the street teaming and kind of putting it towards like the Facebook, you know, the ads and the pushing towards the reaching people more digitally, that, you know, at the same, it happened to coincide.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. But you know, you're talking about word of mouth and that being old school, but it really isn't. I mean, it's old school. Hey, Rob. It's old school, but don't you think that it's new school too? I mean, with the social media, I mean, it's just enhancing the word of mouth, really. Facebook is just another way of having word of mouth, really. I mean, we posted it and shared it, and shared this, via word of mouth. So it's just another way of doing that.
That's true, and I in kind of straddling two different worlds in terms of technology, coming of age without a computer, and then, all of a sudden this explosion. So I kind of forget that word of mouth can also happen, remotely via the internet. So, I mean, you're absolutely right.
So what are some of your tips for, I do the bulk of the booking, but you do a lot of booking too. Obviously, and you're the one with the last say on all that. But what are some of your tips in terms of, like, when you're seeing a band that wants to come play at the Stone Church, and you're looking at their marketing? What are some of the things that you're really looking for? If you're a band watching this, what would you say to them?
We see a lot of, you guys are kind of the first point of contact for bands that are established. Simon says pretty much,
I would say
it's a lot of established bands. We are kind of the first point of contact for bands that are just getting started or more fledgling type of band.
Yeah.
Because the ones who come in on foot. And I'll tell you, a lot of the things that impress me right off the bat are a knowledge of the fact that music is an industry, which sounds common sense, but I think a lot of people still have stars in their eyes and still think that by producing good music, it's automatically going to lead to a career in music. And I wish it was that way, but it's not. I mean, aside from having a real quality product, I think 50% of it is knowing how to reach a new audience, knowing how to market yourself, and knowing that what you have is not just a product, but it's a sellable commodity. And like, I talk to people about this constantly. I wish it wasn't necessarily the case, but it is a consumer driven world. And so I would say that's one of the first things I look for. And if I see a band that I like and they don't seem to have an understanding of this, I love to educate them and talk to them about it. And that's why I think it's so important to have a discourse between venue owners and managers and the musicians themselves, because we want to support the artists. But if we do that by taking a fault in the small business, because every dollar matters as you're trying to build, then it doesn't work for either party. So that's the first thing that I look for and try to educate people about. The second is kind of piggybacking off of that concept is humility and the understanding that if you're in a particular area, that you kind of have to put in the legwork to get a crowd, get a show. And so that is maybe going a step down from where you think you should be in terms of being seen. So I love when established bands from other areas will come to our open mic nights on Sunday and put the time in to set up and not get paid for the show, but expose themselves to a crowd and really give it their all. And I can think of a few bands off the top of my head that have become kind of big sellers at the church just from originally coming in for open mic night. Like Barn Burners String Band, who have brought in a great crowd. They used to come and they would bring their kids in the fall and go on the outdoor patio, and their kids would be playing, and they'd be, you know, tuning their guitars and their banjo and such. And then they would sign up for open mic at 7 because they would come early on because their kids obviously, you know, have an early bedtime. So they'd sign up for the first slot and they would play hard and engage the crowd, and they didn't get any money, and they spent a lot of money on drinks and food. And so, but I love that kind of legwork. And like I said, the humility to, even if you feel like an established band, to take a step back and play an open mic night, because that's how you build a fan base. And from their first show, they built a fan base. So
yeah, that's really, really good advice. I appreciate that.
And then my third point is we think of marketing as kind of not preventative, but before the fact kind of work. But I also think the live show itself is one of the biggest marketing tools. Oh, yeah. And, I mean, you can't, and this gets into kind of philosophical stuff about social media and viewing things at a distance, because you have people who will watch shows online and think that they're at the concert, you know, because there's that kind of disconnect because they're so into social media. But I think that you can't beat a live show. And I think you got to have something that differentiates yourself, whether it's your genre that's a little bit different than anything in this area, or like I said, the engagement with the crowd. And I have talked about this band ad nauseum to people, but I think it's a great example. The David Wax Museum, who's out of Boston, who played at the Stone Church right when I started. So like five and a half years ago, they played to a crowd of 10 or 15. And they came off of the stage and played in the middle of the floor, and they played like they were playing for hundreds of people. And it was super cool. And it was my favorite show. I mean, probably top 5 from working at the Stone Church for almost 6 years now. So it just really made an impression on me. And then they came back and they did the same thing. And everyone who had been at their first show was at the second show and brought their friends. And the next year they came back to a packed room. The next year they were too big for our room, and you know, they've gone on. But I love having witnessed their growth. And I think I haven't been in this industry, like I said, about 6 years. So I haven't been in it too long, but they're one of the bands that I followed and seen just really explode and know exactly how to market themselves. And one of those aspects is their live show.
It's kind of off topic, but you bring up something about creating an experience and the live show being an experience. And I read an article today that was really interesting, and it was talking about monetizing um, the music industry and how hard it is to do these days. And the live show is really one of the only ways to do that these days. And but that it's in creating an experience, whether that's people merchandise, special merchandise, or signed lyric sheets or whatever. But it's the experience and the connection through the experience that fans have that is what's marketable and what is special and valuable to the fan, and that's what you just described essentially.
I think
So
also,
really
it all depends again on your venue, because we're such a small venue, we're such an intimate venue. The stage is a foot off the floor, so you don't necessarily have that distance between the performer and the audience. And our green room is upstairs, but half the time the bands don't use the green room. And the beautiful thing is when the show is over, seeing those musicians come off the stage, and rather than going up to the green room and grabbing some beers and unwinding by themselves, they go out in the crowd and they're selling their merch. They don't have someone selling their merch for them, and they're in there in the crowd talking to people. And it's great for me because I think I can speak for most of us when I say that music really defined our adolescence and early 20s and that sort of thing. So it's really great for me to see these kids being able to talk to these musicians, and that they're creating these memories for life pretty much. And it's awesome. And it takes a few minutes after a show, and yes, the musicians are sweaty and tired and such, but they're putting in that extra effort, and I think that's so cool.
Well, it's not just cool. I mean, that is the marketing that they really need to be doing. It's that creating that engagement and that connection with the fans so that they'll come back the next time because they've had that actual valuable experience that they want to recreate the next time that they come to your show at your venue.
And I think also it's knowing that you have to do that continuously. It's not just a one-time thing.
It's hard.
It's not just doing it to get yourself started, but it's like, for example, Adam Ezra, the Adam Ezra group, every time they come to the Stone Church, even though they have sold out the church historically every single show, Adam is always out in the crowd for at least an hour afterwards. And he's always, he never lets it get to his head or think that he's made it. He's just always there engaging with the crowd. And I think that's what keeps his success.
Well, that's where that humility piece comes in that you were talking about, Yeah, definitely. What are some of the mistakes that you see? Some things I'm sure you see some mistakes that you would love to see people, musicians avoid.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, going back to my first point, I think it's really important to understand that your musical output is not the only thing that you have to give to people when you're on stage. And I see a lot of people caring about technical abilities and just the quality of their music. And that's great. But like I said, you need to engage with the crowd. So just going back on all of my advice that I was just giving, a lot of times if they don't engage with the crowd, it doesn't matter how good their music is. And like I said, the lack of understanding that it is a sellable product. So just because you get a show booked and the Stone Church says to you, we're going to create a Facebook event page and we're going to put up some flyers around the Stone Church, the marketing does not end there. And I think marketing is a two-way street. I have witnessed a lot of venue owners and managers also not understand that. So while they're expecting the band to do the promotion, they're not doing it from their end. So I think it's sort of a give and take relationship. And if a band isn't getting in touch with me and talking about promotion, I think that right there, that's something they could work on. And it's really fast nowadays with email.
Well, it's amazing how many times I send out, we create a Facebook event and I send out emails for every every show we create a Facebook event, and I send out emails to the bands and say, let's co-host this, let's send out invites, let's, work on this promotion. And, the ones that get back to me and say, hey, yeah, I'm gung-ho and I'm sending out flyers and all that, those are the bands I want to rebook,
Exactly.
And those are the bands that end up having good shows. It's really simple math, Yeah.
And even if it doesn't work the first time, if they keep doing it like a few times, I think a lot of people also expect that their first show is going to be amazing. And that's not, as a venue, as a manager, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a sellout right away. I'm looking for enthusiasm. I'm looking for something different. And I'm looking for those initial 15 or 20 people who come in and are super excited and are talking about it the next day. And then we build from there. And then the second show is better. And then the third show is better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. Sorry, like, what's your take on PR? Like, we're going back to social media and like, what do you think your mix needs to be? And back to old school stuff there.
Define what PR is.
Well, just regular, the old school stuff, the press and as opposed to, do you think it really, do you think, in terms of press versus social media versus flyers, that kind of thing?
I think it all depends on the culture of where you're coming from. The Portsmouth area, so Portsmouth is a half an hour away from Newmarket, but in a sense, it's all the Seacoast area. And obviously, we know the owners of all the clubs in Portsmouth, and everyone kind of networks. So it's, even though it's half an hour away, it's still the same kind of community. And they're really big on the arts, and they're really big on kind of keeping the old school traditions. So they have a couple publications, print publications, that still come out every week and are still read and have a high circulation. The Sound is one of the newspapers, and then it's Seacoast Online. It's the Portsmouth Herald, and then they have the Edge as their music publication, which changed. And last year, I think it was Spotlight.
Yeah.
I still think that the people grab those, and I think they look at the music listings. They look at what's coming. I think there's a little bit of limitation with that kind of print media because people are so used to going online and clicking a link and being able to be sent to a YouTube video for a band or their Bandcamp page where they can hear the music instantly. And so when you have print, there's still that mystery of, oh, this band is playing. Well, what do they play? What's their genre? So
versus something like that versus, like a jam base.
Exactly.
Where you can you get the music listings and they're probably more comprehensive and you can really understand what the band's like. So yeah.
I mean, I think that band names become more important when you're just relying on print media because if it's a band name that sounds interesting or different, obviously that's going to spark a little more curiosity than a band name that's just kind of generic. So I mean, I think there's limitations to it, but I also think there's a sort of joy in picking up a newspaper and just checking the listings. And we have so many music experts on the Seacoast. One off the top of my head, Ben Anderson and Chris Hislop run their promotional company called Bright and Lion Music, and they put on a bunch of shows. Dom Fleming's Session Americana this Friday, great bands, and Chris Hislop is a journalist, so he also writes CD reviews and music reviews and interviews, all the usual suspects in the music scene, and puts those down in print. So even though they can be accessed online, obviously, because all newspapers can be accessed online, he's still putting that out there, and so there's still stuff in print and in circulation about that. And I think it's one of the great things about our area.
Yeah. So just parting thoughts and tips that you come to mind as we wrap up for musicians trying to navigate this crazy world of music marketing.
I would say, I mean, for me personally, I love when musicians will come up and introduce themselves to me when I'm at work. I think it's great. I think it shows initiative, and I think right away it shows a sense of collaboration and this sense that, oh, we can work on something together. And just yesterday, I met with a local musician who wants to put together a jazz series, and it was great to sit with him and just rap about how we can bring jazz into Newmarket because it's a genre that we don't represent right now. And that's just so great. And he contacted us, and he came in the next day after I responded to his email, and he was eager and really willing to negotiate compensation and talk about all those sorts of things. And he seemed to understand what this industry is about. That was awesome. So just being approachable, like I said, being humble, coming to open mic nights, and far and away, I think the most important thing is developing some way of differentiating yourself, some kind of shtick that you can bring into your live performance to grab at the fans and the people in the audience, and then taking the show off of the stage after you're done playing and engaging with your crowd and creating these connections that, you know, can be spread all over. Because even though we're in the social media age, I personally don't think you can replace that face-to-face contact.
Well, and that's not what people are necessarily looking for. I mean, that social media upholds and enhances the experience that fans are looking for, but ultimately they're looking for that real connection, and that's what you can get through the live show, and that's what the Stone Church is providing. So I agree with you completely. Well, thank you so much, Abby, for being on the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. I appreciate it. And my name is Kharmah, and this was the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. We've had Abby Sabachetti of the Stone Church in Newmarket, New Hampshire. Appreciate you being on, and we're going to be taking next week off for Thanksgiving, because that's just too crazy. And I'm not quite sure who we're going to be having on next, but it will be December 3rd for our next installment. So thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you on December 3rd. Bye-bye.